This is a disclaimer before I start the video. It has come to my attention that in the process of making this video, a video with a similar title and purpose, named Why Bethesda Was Never That Great, has been released, and it virtually covers a fair amount of the same information I'm going to cover in this video as well. I blame myself for this. I've had this video idea since May of 2019. And only recently, in November of 2019, did I find the confidence to work on it and finish it in January of 2020. While we both cover a lot of the same topics, this person neglected to cover a lot of crucial information and contextual references I personally feel are long overdue for public exposure. So if you have seen this video, please understand that I'm well aware of the potential comparisons and will do my best to provide new information. So that's it really. Without a further ado, let's commence in this video. Yeah, I said it. They always sucked. This is just the first time we've collectively noticed. I guess I gotta explain myself. Okay, Bethesda is a company I used to hold up to an emphatically high regard, praising them for their games and assuming the developmental progress they've made with each subsequent release since my own personal introduction to their library. Fallout 3 was by their own machination, merit, and design. Yeah, I know, it's kinda stupid. It took me a bit over a year of playing before I even realized New Vegas wasn't even developed by them. I was 11 at the time, it's pretty stupid, forgive me. And when Skyrim dropped, I was absolutely convinced that these people were a step above all other developers, that the genius and scale of their games were absolutely unrivaled, and a space where I found monotony was lingering around a lot of one-off or lackluster titles in my eyes at the time. Looking back at the time, I was naive as fuck and would look at my younger self with a constipated face at how fucking fanboyish and stupid my viewpoints were for this creatively fraudulent group of fucking cronies. Bethesda was never a good developer. I guess if I had to be more accurate, their ingenuity ended when their popularity began. When Bethesda was a niche company, they released some relatively solid titles. The sole property they owned at the time was Elder Scrolls, and they released some pretty strong 3 first entries. I feel this is the case because making games back then were a lot simpler. The standard definition era made video game design an entirely different task, a much simpler task than the arena it is today. And while that hypothesis is purely speculative, I feel their crippling reliance on their extremely dated game engine, as well as the outsourcing of developmental strides being on behalf of their extremely loyal modding community, are staggeringly undeniable points as to why it's pretty easy to assess that, along with a myriad of detailed public oopsies where Bethesda themselves shit the bed and quite literally break their games in attempts to patch them. That and a lot of things we at one point passed off as the consequences of ambition, we are retroactively assessing as telltale signs of their laziness and inability to evolve, we once excused at the time. Another thing to note is the vehemently greedy antics that late Bethesda titles have been subjected to. Introducing Creation Club, a paid mod service they've been trying to get off the ground since 2015 when they initially attempted to roll it through Steam, although they repatented it, restructured it, and poorly attempted to mask it as the product we see now. It's still clearly obvious they're franchising their paid mod service once more, which isn't even their own mods. They quite literally are just taking mods the community has already created for free on the Nexus Mods website and selling them to people, forcibly so, with Creation Club being entangled with the purchase of any of their newer games now, because fuck you. What I find interesting is that when you speak of Bethesda in a negative connotation, people strictly think that this is solely because of what's happened with Fallout 76. Nah, they've been gargling Herculean cock long before this point, bro. The public view of Bethesda has radically shifted since the sole release of Fallout 76 and possibly built up ire from Fallout 4's failure of a design, turning the company's signet from a nostalgic blast back from the past to, for lack of a better words, a money-grubbing, shit-eating, two-faced conglomerate of micro-dick scumfucks shitting out half-eaten games because fuck you, you'll fix it later.
You are one of the first to emerge into an untamed and very different wasteland.
But I digress. Bethesda is teetering on the edge of a veritable abyss with the recent drama and malcontent surrounding Fallout 76. Here, however, we aim to shed more light on Bethesda's far less than stellar track record, and hopefully shift the public views on Bethesda as a game developer. Everyone and their mother knows about and acknowledges the travesty of Fallout 76, and are subsequently baffled at how poorly Bethesda is handling themselves and their interactions with their fanbase. Most recently, and most notably, Bethesda is finding modders who use their knowledge to point out bugs to Bethesda and report them. sounds harmless. Bethesda, however, responded to these reports in an absolutely grotesque fashion, banning these players not just from Fallout 76, but from the Bethesda game launcher itself. This not only means their access to all Bethesda games are barred, but they cannot even use the key Bethesda provides them to appeal their ban, as they cannot access their own accounts to do so. And that's just one example upon several examples, some of which are likely going to arrive well after we record this script and possibly before or after we even upload this video. We are here to make the claim that this behavior is absolutely nothing new and that Bethesda has been this way for an exceedingly long time and are just now truly revealing themselves to the public. Bethesda can also be directly attributed to the predatory consumption of beloved IPs, much like EA, specifically that of Prey and Dishonored 2. The view of Bethesda as a great developer turned bad must be shifted, as we, as the player base, have allowed them to go from an above average developer to a very real boogeyman in the gaming industry. We are not witnessing the peak and burnout of a recently creatively bankrupt studio. They've almost always been this way. What we are witnessing is the peak and burnout of the studio's goodwill in the eyes of the public. With a title so bad, the nostalgia dragon we've all been chasing since whatever entry we've personally been introduced to in their catalog of games with has been brutally butchered with a saga so nightmarishly bad, even the most casual Bethesda enthusiast has been expunged from their temple of ignorance, and for the first time is forced to assess Bethesda critically and objectively. And we're all waking up to the realization that the game has been rigged from the start. Before I dissect any of their games, let me take a time to talk about the creation engine, aka the Gamebryo/NetImmerse engine. This engine is old as fuck. It is literally 22 years old. This engine has college debt, works 9 to 5, and smokes cigarettes. This engine is old enough to legally drink and saw The Phantom Menace in theaters. When this engine was 3 years old, Todd Howard bought it a doodle bear and a pair of fucking soccer boppers. There's somebody in high school watching this video who was a gooey stream of baby batter kept warm and a smelly ball sack while this engine was on his 5th game. And while this proverbial fucking dinosaur should have retired the same year Kobe did from basketball, I need you to understand something. It is not the reason why Bethesda games are so fucking buggy. Interestingly enough, the Gamebryo engine, aka the Creation engine, aka the NetImmerse engine, has a very extensive track record of AAA titles that exist well outside of Bethesda's spectrum, and all of those titular titles ran smoothly, near flawlessly, with the same engine. So how come Bethesda's games constantly fall prey to the same busted, inconsistent, wildly unstable variables in each installment? The video I'm referencing is Zarek Zakharan's The Creation Engine Did Nothing Wrong, in which he goes into explicit detail of the Creation Engine, its origin, and its usage throughout his life cycle. So the first thing he brings up in his video is that Gamebryo engine was an engine, get this, that was created for MMOs. Yes, massive multiplayer online game. The Creation engine actually shares a majority of its elements from the previous 3 incarnations, or 2, I don't fucking know. So to act like it's been modified enough since to where it no longer was made for this primary purpose is bullshit. To the point where in a Fallout 76 interview by NoClip, Bethesda admitted in the process of repurposing the engine, they had to rip codes from Fallout 4 that date all the way back to Morrowind. And in Zarek Zakharan's very own video, he shows this clip.
But this was the most recent picture I was able to find of a YouTube comment saying that. There is no Gamebryo code in the Creation engine, and there hasn't been for a while. However, when we look back at NoClip interviews for Fallout 76, they mentioned they had to rip out Morrowind code from Fallout 4. I suspected this long beforehand because Oblivion, Skyrim, and Fallout 4 all contain some of the same bugs as Morrowind that have never been fixed. Hell, I mean, we can go into Elder Scrolls V, the executable for Skyrim, and see Gamebryo hooks.
I need you to understand that this level of ineptitude and laziness has nothing to do with the Gamebryo engine, but has everything to do with Bethesda being so cognitively atrophied. They did the coding equivalent of cutting mold off a block of cheese. I could come inside of a condom, flip it inside out, and it'd be more sanitary than the script for Fallout 76 after getting its sloppy 15th. That game has AIDS, fucking Matrix herpes. What's even more interesting though is that the Elder Scrolls Online, more specifically its large-scale PvP, was primarily inspired by a game called Dark Age of Camelot, and the combat director of that game even assisted in making ESO's combat. The reason why that's so interesting is because Dark Age of Camelot, an MMO, that's the spiritual predecessor of ESO essentially, was a Gamebryo engine game, and MMORPG was made on the same engine, a more primitive version as Fallout 76. Just let that roll around for a bit. Oh, and it shared virtually none of the same issues that plague Bethesda games. None. In fact, do you know how many fully functioning titles run off of Gamebryo? Warhammer Online, Rift, Civilization 4, Catherine, Rockstar's Bully, all of these high-tier phenomenal games, and none of them share the issues that Bethesda games do. In fact, the very first game that Bethesda used Gamebryo engine to make, Morrowind, was a buggy fucking mess, sharing the same bugs as Fallout 76, a game that was made almost 2 decades later. Again, just let that roll around. You know what I'm saying? Just, sit on there for a bit. Think about it. Okay. The reason why is that Gamebryo engine uses a cell or chunk-based data system. So cells from all previous Bethesda titles carry over into new ones since they all share the same scripts. Bethesda has very shitty coding and scripting, which is why they all share the same bugs. What terrifies me though, like real talk, is that Fallout 76 is multiplayer exclusive, so they had to rip out all of the single player coding to make its functionality. What the fuck did they replace that coding with? Like, I don't know, bro. Like, fucking hot Matrix come. I really don't fucking know. Like, real talk. Okay, anyway, in fact, on top of Gamebryo, Oblivion used the Havoc physics engine and had some of the most hilariously broken bugs in all of gaming. You used to close a door on a body and watch it melt into taffy. You know what other game uses the Havoc engine? Half-Life 2. Half-Life fucking 2. Y'all even need to explain that? Like, let's just move on. And this is why people who mod Bethesda games are actually superior than Bethesda at coding. Yes, actually fucking superior. They have to look at this garbage jury-rigged piece of fucking shit that has coding all the way back from 2002 and somehow make mods like Project Nevada, Worms 2, Sky UI, and Character Overhaul. I need you to understand that what makes their game so broken is not the engine at all. It's the coding and scripting that those mentally regressive, lazy fucks are producing in that studio. To put it simply, only a bad carpenter blames his tools. If you want to see more in depth how much of a fucking shit show Bethesda's coding is, I'll leave a link to Zarek Zakaron's video. It is a phenomenal video and it breaks down everything I've just mentioned thoroughly and fluidly. But I just wanted you to have an understanding of what we're about to walk into. And now that you have an understanding as to how atrociously Bethesda handles their own IPs mechanically, let's take the knowledge we have now and truly break down each entry into their library of games and judge them face value and a retroactive lens free of bias and delusion. Fallout 4 was a product of mods mixed in with experimental dialogue and RPG systems that failed miserably. The game felt more like a shooter with RPG elements than an RPG with shooter elements. The game also failed on several other fronts: player importance, solid gameplay loops around RPG elements, subpar DLC, and the most atrocious element to those games I personally cannot stand is how blatantly they rip any ingenuity and creativity for the game's mechanical strides straight from the mods of predecessor games. The most innovative aspect of Fallout 4, its combat, is directly ripped from Project Nevada, a mod for New Vegas. The character being able to run using action points, the grenade hotkey, VATS being repurposed for quick time action, all from this one single mod. And there's elements from that mod that they failed to implement, like thermal vision, night vision, multiple ammo types, combat perks, individual body part damage, headshot damage, bullet time, etc. Its character creation is a worse version of the advanced character creation menu from Skyrim. Its weapon customization is honestly the fucking McDonald's equivalent of weapon upgrading. And to top it off, gross practices surrounding the DLC with the inclusion of Creation Club, as well as shifting around prices for the season pass, retroactively making it more expensive. A full $60 premium game with a season pass and microtransactions. Jesus. The game was also philosophically flawed as an RPG, forcing you to be a protagonist in a story you didn't ask for, with a backstory you never wanted and motives you didn't even believe in. We could also articulate Bethesda's incompetence, releasing a high-res DLC pack that not only clogged the game's rendering speeds on PC, but was directly comparable to a modder's high-resolution pack, which was significantly better in quality and more stable than what Bethesda had to offer, on top of, in my opinion, horribly mundane DLC releases. This is a scant entry in the long history of Bethesda releasing content or patches that breaks the game that modders didn't have to go back and fix. Fallout 4 was a colossal disappointment that Todd Howard severely overhyped to prey on the RPG drought that resided in the release year of this game. Todd Howard has a knack for grossly over-exaggerating or straight lying about titles, by the way. This definitely wasn't the first or last time this has happened, obviously. But I want to focus on Bethesda's failures as a company and a developer subsidiary. And trust me, it gets far, far, far worse than this. If I could describe Skyrim as simply as possible, Skyrim was lightning in a bottle. P. Hines even admitted this in a particular interview I recollect watching from some time ago when I was consumed by my hype for the game. A series of flukes and happy accidents that added together that create a Bethesda title that is irregularly high quality for their standards, and I absolutely believe him looking back at the collective timelines that game has. What's hilarious though is that really isn't saying much, seeing as how Skyrim had a litany of atrocious bugs, including but not limited to data overflow that would cause save games on your PlayStation 3 to accumulate in size until eventually a single save game file was literally gigabytes, which severely impacted the performance and stability of Skyrim, making it more susceptible to corruptions, glitches, and basically ensuring that anything that could potentially go wrong in your Skyrim save did, and did so spectacularly. This is coming from someone who had 3,000 hours on one of his 3 characters. I promise you, I've seen everything. On top of that, Bethesda was releasing official patches that actually broke the game, with dragons flying backwards, horses floating in the sky, entire quest lines being unfinishable or startable, honestly. I remember Meredith Beacon being unobtainable at a certain point to start her quest line, and to top it all off, if none of that was embarrassing enough, we PS3 users had to wait an entire year after PC and Xbox played all 3 DLC for Skyrim because Bethesda was too lazy to figure out the coding for PlayStation. An entire year. Also, they released 4 different versions of the same game over 8 years, retroactively implemented the Creation Club in its latest edition, sabotaging modders' ability to use tools and Creation Kit in the process. And I find it all absolutely hilarious because I found an article with P. Hines boasting about how another studio would have just made Skyrim 2 a year later, implying that other studios are greedy and will rush out the sequel to capitalize on the hype. P. Hines said this 2 years after the Skyrim Legendary Edition came out, a year before the Skyrim Special Edition came out, and 2 years before Skyrim for the Nintendo Switch came out. You re-release the same game off its hype for almost a decade. You can't make this shit up. You really can't. In spite of all this absolute ass fucking that this game got for monetization, Skyrim is unarguably one of the greatest gaming experiences of all time. I have to give it that. I'm sorry. While a lot of its elements are borrowed and unintentional, it added up to be a one-of-a-kind experience. What's ironic is that their other series, Fallout, has not been able to match this level of reverence, with Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 being otherwise less than stellar entries in comparison. However, what's hilarious is that the best Fallout game to come out post-Bethesda acquisition wasn't even made by Bethesda, even though they were the reason it almost didn't happen. Fallout New Vegas wasn't made by Bethesda, and to say it was influenced by them is extremely Actually no, it's not. It's not extremely generous. It was influenced by them because Bethesda's management for Obsidian was so atrocious, so reckless and irresponsible, and so manipulative and egregious, it was nothing short of a miracle New Vegas even exists. Bethesda did Obsidian wrong, entirely wrong, absolutely wrong, and didn't even pay them the bonuses they earned because they missed a Metacritic score of 1 single point. That is right, people. Obsidian almost went under indefinitely contracting for Bethesda, as not only did Bethesda give Obsidian 18 fucking months to make New Vegas with zero quality assurance, but under contractual obligation, they assigned the regards to bonuses for the creation of the game solely to the score of Metacritic specifically, requiring a score of 85 to receive said bonuses. And because God has boomer humor, or more likely than not, Bethesda probably directly or indirectly influenced this, despite receiving universal appraisal, they received a score of 84 out of 85. And that in itself costed $300 million off the fucking table. Absolutely fucking despicable. I want you to imagine for a second, a studio comes to you with the desire to make a game with the scale and scope of Fallout 3, if not better, and they expect you to match that massive scale with 1/4 of the development time. And you push out the best content you possibly could, despite that crunch, despite that inhuman expectation. And as you put out the game and expect to get the praise that you feel you deserve, you miss $300 million worth of revenue bonuses off one score point off a single Real Taylor's review. That is depressing just thinking about. And if that wasn't bad enough, Fallout New Vegas is definitively the best Fallout game to exist post Bethesda acquisition thus far by leaps and fucking bounds, based off the opinion of the majority. And objectively, it's a spiritual successor of the original 3 games that is worthy of being called one, arguably of the same, if not better, quality. After all, the original creators of Fallout as an intellectual property work for Obsidian, so it's not really shocking they created a superior Fallout game. I can only hypothesize why Bethesda treated Obsidian so poorly, with my hypothesis being that Bethesda either A, is actually that negligent and irresponsible with the management of their own IPs, and attempting to force another studio to expedite an ambitious product is one of the many practices they participate in, which explains a lot, actually, if that's how they work internally. Or my more cynical take, and unfortunately I have an outstanding amount of evidence supporting this, B, similar to how Activision buys development studios to hollow them out and assimilate them to Activision subsidiaries because they want to conform or eliminate as much competition as possible, Bethesda purposefully manipulated a small indie studio, Obsidian at the time, in the manner which they did to force lenience and sway of their favor to inevitably attempt to buy out Obsidian to work for them. And as much as I simply just want them to be a pack of dumbasses, Obsidian is one of several studios Bethesda has done this to, and that is unfortunately where things do go left. This is the meat and potatoes of the videos, folk. So I'm gonna need you to especially pay attention to this part, because this brings things full circle. Fallout 76 is a commercial, critical, and cultural nightmare that absolutely and totally stretches and rips the goodwill and faith people once had for Bethesda entirely. And now that we are all collectively on the same page, let us take a look at something that we at the time collectively chose to ignore because of the goodwill we had. That was both a foreshadowing and a precursor, years before 76 was even a thought. And run. Prey 2 was a thing back in 2011 before Bethesda absolutely destroyed it. Prey was a sci-fi shooter that released back in 2006, starring a Native American named Tommy, who used supernatural powers and heavy artilleries to combat an alien race of man-eaters who wanted to harvest the Earth itself, eating its inhabitants and using a world-eating ship to consume the planet as a whole. I personally didn't play it, but a lot of people thought the game was a fun and incredible fusion of a lot of FPS elements that added to make it a unique experience. The game was a cult success and inspired a sequel developed by its original developer, Human Head Studios. Human Head Studios was an independent developer, free of a publisher, and it just so happens that with the production of Prey 2, Bethesda was the publisher, willing to oblige them and aid them in publishing their Covenant sequel. This seems rather tame this far. Bethesda offering a helping hand to those in need of a boost to their own IPs. However, Prey 2 was good. When E3 2011 came around and the gameplay reveal was unveiled, it was really good. And Bethesda decided to overstep boundaries and wanted to acquire the Prey IP and own Human Head Studios as one of its subsidiaries. Human Head Studios declined that offer because they wanted to remain free and work with any publisher they like to, and Bethesda reacted like dropping sodium in a tub of piss. Bethesda, to put it bluntly, sabotaged the game on purpose to force Human Head Studios to sell themselves to Bethesda as a subsidiary as a result of a collapsing studio due to a denial of funds, among other several egregious acts on Bethesda's part. They did everything in their power to purposefully fuck over the developers, maliciously so, because they forced the studio's hand in decision making to cave in to their demands. Keep in mind that this was the immediate turnaround of an initially optimistic Bethesda who was so overjoyed and pleased with the product they received. They promised an extension to the development time for the game, initially an additional 6 to 12 months. They gave Obsidian Entertainment 18 months with no quality control altogether, and here they are so impressed with the product they slap on an additional year of funded development time. However, Bethesda was not receptive of the subsequent admission of Human Head Studios, who plainly sided against being owned by the company, which caused an immediate and visceral reaction on Bethesda's behalf. And when I say visceral, it was immediately followed by some of the most petty, malicious, and overtly manipulative tactics I think I've seen in the industry thus far. Bethesda sought out to systematically destabilize Human Head Studios to a weakened state that would allow them to essentially scoop up a financially and morally distraught development team to assimilate into their subsidiaries. And they started doing so via milestone manipulation. So remember how I previously stated that Bethesda promised a year of development time. Since that wasn't in contract for Human Head Studios, Bethesda wasn't legally obligated to follow through with said promise. And because of that, they most certainly did not. On top of that, they exacerbated the deadline requirements without any extension on time given, fully expecting the studio to commit to the increased throttle of workflow. When the studio couldn't keep up with the deadlines because, they're human fucking beings, Bethesda would subsequently deny them funding or payment due to the failing to meet their audacious and ludicrous requirements, which would fiscally bleed the company dry and leave them in a severely weakened state to scoop the studio up entirely. Without money, Human Head Studios unfortunately could not stay afloat, let alone finish the game, and would have no other choice but to accept Bethesda's buyout should they desire to finish their game. Bethesda essentially claimed that the development studio wasn't progressing fast enough to finish the game, simultaneously while Human Head Studios is outspoken about the egregious deadlines Bethesda has set in place for them and how utterly impossible it is to accomplish them within the time frame given. I need you to sit down for this next part, bro. Are you sitting? Don't drink anything. Don't eat anything. Cause I swear to God, you will fucking die. Bethesda has the audacity, the gall, the gumption, the fucking impertinence to claim this is the reason why they are doing what they are doing. According to IGN and their report, a Bethesda representative said, "As we stated before, we delayed the release of Prey 2 as development did not progress satisfactorily and the game did not meet our quality standards. Beyond this, we don't have any new update or comment." Bethesda quality standard. Bethesda quality standard. Bethesda quality standards. Bethesda quality standards. Man, that's... Whew. I don't know, man. That's... Imagine shit that wasn't video games with Bethesda quality standards. Oh, you thirsty, bro? How about some BQS water, bro? Straight from Flint, Michigan. Tastes just like Coca-Cola, bro. That shit fire. Oh, you want some of that BQS meat from Mexico, bro? Oh, that green shit. Apsis. That's guacamole. It's a Mexican pig, bro. Come on, now let's teach you that in history class. You slow as fuck, bro. A fucking Bethesda quality standard condom as a nigga lathering your cock in bubble soap, then blowing on it like a birthday candle. Bethesda claiming that this game does not live up to the quality standards of their... I'm sorry, that's just crazy. The quality standards of their studio, given their abhorrent track record in itself, raises several flags, actually. But even more concerning, how in any way is that a legitimate reason to starve the pockets of the studio developing that game when you are simultaneously trying to outright buy and assimilate the studio as one of your own subsidiaries. If this studio is so incompetent, so lazy, and so utterly mediocre that they can't even produce a game to the upside down shopping cart street hot dog of quality standards from Bethesda, why are you still trying to seize their studio? And even furthermore than that, if you saw them as a bunch of screw-ups incapable of accomplishing a quality game, and the progress thus far has been that abysmal, how is it at all possible that they initially managed to show you a product so impressive that it convinced you to extend development time as generously as an entire funded year? A dev from Human Head Studios also spoke out saying it was one of the few studios that could work with and improve ID technology. They wanted to buy us at a sweet price, but the developer denied the buyout. Human Head didn't want to permanently marry itself to a publisher that was bleeding Human Head dry. This would limit the studio's ability to work on its own creative endeavors down the line, potentially with other publishers. The lead world designer of Prey 2 also tweeted out in a since-deleted tweet after the controversy around 2014. Only thing good about Prey 2 being canned, I can stop hearing fallacies about quality reasons before calling out P. Hines, ensuring that he knew what happened. Side note as well, the developers were very vocal about the things Bethesda did to them during the development of Prey 2 and how utterly shafted they were by Bethesda, tweeting out several strings of tweets from multiple devs, all but confirming the legitimacy of this event. Albeit, I think the fact that multiple people were singing the same song means there's a sheet they reference somewhere, you know? Also, according to this article, in November of 2011, Human Head Studios attempted to go on strike to forcibly demand changes to how they were being treated on Bethesda's behalf, and as a chess move to prevent Bethesda from seizing the IP in a final-ditch attempt. Also, this is neither here nor there, but I also heard through the echoes of old forums that Bethesda did this exact same thing to Arcane Studios with Dishonored 2. Milestone manipulation in an attempt to weaken the studio to the state of decay, allowing them to scoop it up. Allegedly, additional funding was given at each milestone reached in development. For a while, everything was going fine, but with time, Bethesda became more and more strict about acknowledging the milestones, forcing Arcane to go back and redo their work, at times unnecessarily so. Apparently, there was a story particularly grievous about Bethesda complaining a level was too bright, something along those lines, and the dev responsible was so frustrated that they made 0 changes to it and resubmitted the same level a week later, at which point Bethesda complained it was too dark and they had to go back and make it brighter. The funding for the last milestone would run out, forcing them to take out loans to pay for paychecks and expenses until the next milestone was reached. Eventually, they had to go to Bethesda and say they were declaring bankruptcy and that they wouldn't be finishing the game. Bethesda offered to pay off their loans in exchange for selling the studio to them next for nothing. Arcane apparently agreed, and apparently the milestones went back to being reached on schedule. And that was how Bethesda acquired the studio as a subsidiary. I don't have any concrete evidence or testimonies for this, so please take this with a grain of salt. But personally, if you want my opinion, they did this with Obsidian, they did this with Human Head Studios. It's not too far-fetched that this is a proclivity they exercise in tactics to seize potential subsidiaries. Just my opinion though. I could also take this time to exacerbate the failings of Fallout 3, Oblivion, and Morrowind, but I've more than provided a myriad of information to carry my narrative above and beyond the initial expectation of these people simply being incompetent developers. I truly and honestly wish they were simply that, but their actions both as a game studio and a publisher have reflected far more malicious, uncaring, disrespectful, selfish, and outright deceitful atmospheres that even I don't feel comfortable admitting. And despite how overwhelmingly negative this information is, allow me to wrap this video up with perspective and hopefully we all walk away with a newfound understanding. We as a collective have been expunged out of our nostalgic high. Our rose-colored glasses have been shattered by the boot of the oppressive reality we now face, staring Bethesda dead in the face, forced to witness a horribly obsolete studio that has spent the last decade exacerbating their status, taking any and every opportunity to stretch the limits of their good standing in the eyes of the public. Bethesda hasn't changed as a company. Rather, we've evolved as patrons and loyal partisans. The only thing that's changed is the narrative, because we for the first time recognize the situation for what it actually is. Now, understand me please when I say this. There is a such thing as separating the art from the artist. Skyrim was an amazing, phenomenal game. Fallout 3 was a great game. Oblivion was a great game. Morrowind was a great game, despite their glitches and shortcomings. Bethesda refused to grow as a studio and suffered stagnancy as a result. Whereas other studios developed, thrived, evolved, and learned, Bethesda is a proverbial old dog who refuses to learn new tricks and would instead use deception, manipulation, and underhanded tactics to receive their treat. Treats being your favor and your money. Understand that we as individuals are limitless in our potential. No matter the pessimistic viewpoints you may have adopted, I need you to understand that objectively speaking, you have worth. You are valuable beyond your needs as a consumer or an asset to a company or a patron to your subscription. You are a human being, enigmatic and bold and sculpted out of the dirt, formed over time to be the master of the land you walk on. Whether you've convinced yourself or not, you are here for a reason and your actions have consequences, big or small, that will permeate in the thing you choose to influence. I'm a spiritual person. I believe in God, and I understand that sentiment isn't shared universally, and I respect that, but please hear me out. The Bible does say, see as well as pray. It is not enough that you pray, but you have to have faith. You must do, because faith is a verb, an action word. You must take action to inspire faith, because through faith do you believe your actions will follow through. God, karma, consequence, faith, whatever you depict it as, nothing in this world responds to inaction. If you choose to be a bystander in a situation, you subject events to unfold based around partisans you may or may not agree with. And I need you to understand that your actions are powerful. When we speak as a collective, we are heard and we ring out shockwaves that cause reform and change that permanently shift dynamics in the world around us forever. You do not have to accept this behavior from anyone. We as a collective do not have to forgive Bethesda for these actions just because we as a collective have the power to change things directly and indirectly. You do not have to buy Bethesda products, you don't have to spend money on Fallout First, you don't have to pre-order Starfield or Elder Scrolls 6, you don't have to accept any of what's happening, and that goes for everything in your life. If we want to see change, we not only do it together, but we do so under the banner of unity. Black, white, Asian, Latino, male, female, we are powerful. Bethesda is a garbage company and several developers have shown how outdated their philosophies and business practices are. We don't have to drone for them any longer. If we don't like this shit, let's end this shit, or force them to fix their shit. This goes for everything in your life. If there's something to take away from this video, aside from awareness to these issues, it's to not feel hopeless, because nothing in this world is out of our control, especially people and how they choose to conduct themselves. We do not have to accept this. We do not have to roll over for them. We do not have to let things be the way they are. If we want to change this, if we want what we feel we deserve as consumers, let's act on it. And let's act on it as a unit, not as individuals. Let me know what you guys think below in the comment section. Thank you for taking your time to watch this video. My apologies if I got a little too sentimental at the end. I just genuinely feel that. This has been ArchWizard CJ. I wish you all a good morrow, and I'm off for the time being.
This has been an ArchWizard CJ special. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe.